There we go. Okay. Here's a quick agenda for today. We've already done the first two. We're going to kick it off with some APIPP updates. I'm going to talk first about community engagement and all things communications. Then we're going to move on to Ari, who's going to talk about terrestrial invasive species and forest pest management. And then Brian's going to take over with aquatic invasive species and comparison of monitoring techniques. At 11:15, we have our partner highlight, the Ausable Freshwater Center. They're going to talk about their conservation nursery, which we'll see later after lunch. At 11:45, we're going to do wrap up. And at noon, we're going to do lunch. And somewhere in between 11:45 and noon, if we could all go outside, I'd love to grab a group photo of everyone before we do lunch. That would be awesome. So then after lunch, around 12:45, we're all going to pack up and head over to the nursery. This, of course, is the in-person part of the program. And then around 1, we're going to tour the nursery, and there might be a little hands-on activity we can all do while we're there. We should wrap up probably around, I'd say 2:30, something like that. All right, community engagement. So when I talk about community engagement, my title is communications manager. I mentioned earlier, I've been with APIPP about 3 years now. And it's been a lot of fun. My first year, I was kind of keeping up, just learning all the cyclical things of APIPP world. But I feel like in the last year and a half, 2 years, I've been able to, all these ideas I've had in the back of my head, I've been able to kind of start to build on them and put them out there. So you're going to hear about a couple of those today. Engaging the community is more about just talking about what we're doing. I mean, that's part of it, right? We want to get the information out there. We want to let the public know, like, this is what we're doing, and this is why it's important. But it's also about engaging different groups of people. Last Friday, I gave a talk at Petrova Elementary School, K through 5. I did a little naturalist plant identification 101 thing. I snuck invasive species in there a little bit, but that's hard to do with kindergartners. But that's important because we're building people who care about the environment, who care about nature, who have now at least heard of invasive species, who maybe will go home and tell their parents about it. So there's a lot of ways to engage people, and oftentimes it's meeting them where they're at. In 2025, there's a million ways to communicate, and you would think it would be easy to get the message out, but it's not because everyone's all over the place and there's this constant influx of information. So what I do is I try to figure out ways to meet people, to get their attention, to get them the information, and there's a number of different ways we do that. And then ultimately, we want people to take that next step. So it's great if they know what invasive species are, but we really want them to clean, drain, dry. We want them to volunteer to go out and monitor for invasive species and to report them if they think they've seen an invasive species. And that's really like that connection, I think is the tricky part, but if that doesn't happen, then I'm wasting my time. Like we really need them to do those actions. So we try a lot of different things, and we've had some pretty good success, I think. We do events like this. We do workshops, trainings, webinars, presentations. That's just a small snapshot. I mean, this summer you look at our calendars, and we're going to tabling events, and we're speaking at lake associations and garden clubs. We're organizing our own events like this and inviting people to come to them. And then we do working groups. I'm going to talk about those in a little bit, but we have 3 sort of big working groups that we do. We have our new APIPP monthly newsletter, which obviously goes out once a month. But we did the 3rd one, I think. Yeah, the 3rd one just went out here in May. We'll be doing another one in June. And then we do more traditional media outlets. So, newspapers, radio stations, things like that. And of course, we have social media and YouTube. I'm not going to talk too much about those today. I want to focus a little bit more on some of the ones up here. So let's start with the news. This is my favorite way. I worked in this industry for a while, so I love journalism, and I love the news. So I love getting on the radar of editors and reporters, and it's been working. In the last year and a half or 2 years, we've seen, I think, a big increase of reporters reaching out to us. So here's a couple examples. These are just press releases I wrote that went out, and a lot of our, especially like our more hyper-local publications like the Sun and the Enterprise, will pick them up. They didn't do anything to these. They just kind of ran them as is, which is great. I want them to do that. But ultimately, like a press release, it's great when they run it, but a press release should kind of plant that seed in their heads of like, hey, there's this invasive species thing, and there's these people who work on it. And there's stories there, right? We want them to write stories and tell stories about what we're doing. So it's good when they do this, but it's even better when they do this. This is a story in local ADK, which is a free, I'm not sure if it's like every other month now or how often it comes out, but it's maybe 8 or 10 times a year they put it out, if you haven't seen it around. And they reached out to us for this, and they did a story on community science, and they thought, like, hey, APIPP would be great to talk to about community science. That's awesome, because we rely heavily on volunteers to do what we do. There's only a few of us on APIPP, and there's a 6 million acre area that we cover. So the more people we can get out there looking for invasive species, the more chance we have of finding them and knowing where they are. Yeah, so they reached out to us, and I think this is the first story that they've done with us. So I thought that this was a really great thing, and it just came out. So pick it up. And then I wanted to highlight this because I thought this was cool. That's Tamara. She was our last program manager. And back in August, I think this is one of the last things she did before she retired. She sat down with Lake George Association and did this podcast. And it actually didn't come out until I think it was February. So it came out February of this year. But it's called Hemlocks Under Siege. And if you know anything about Tamara, you know she loves hemlocks and she can talk about hemlocks for a very long time. This is 48 minutes and 4 seconds about Tamara talking about hemlocks. But it's a really informative podcast. She did a great job. They did a great job putting it together. And this is the kind of thing we want to see, you know, them reaching out to us and saying like, hey, I want to do a story on X, Y, and Z. You are the experts. You are the source for that. It allows us to get the right information out there, and it also allows the public to see like we're the ones to come to if you find an invasive species or you have a question. We're the ones who can help you. So we've been mentioned about, it's more than 20 times in local media so far this year. That's a pretty good number. We're on track to beat last year's number, which I'm always trying to do. And we have a couple stories out too. We have Adirondack Life recently reached out to me with some questions. So there's going to be a story in a month or two in Adirondack Life. And then Adirondack Explorer recently talked to Brian about something they're working on. So we have a couple that are coming out, and then we have a couple press releases that we're going to be putting out in the next month that should get some play too. And then it's hard too with this because there are so many little publications. Like we've been featured in like Lake Protector newsletters, and you know if we're not signed up for that, we might not happen to see it. And there's a million of them. And there's also like a lot of little publications throughout the park and these little towns and things. So we do our best to track them down. So I always say more than 20 because I'm sure there's some we missed. So yeah, working groups and volunteers. This is important. APIPP is active in 3 working groups. We do our aquatic invasive species working group. This one's been around for a while. I believe it started with a specific project, Brian, right, or 2, but it's kind of evolved a little bit since then, and it's more talking about invasive species, aquatic invasive species issues, and just opportunities to collaborate within the group. And then there's the Conservation Communicators Roundtable. So I host those. We do a couple of those a year, and basically it's a bunch of people who do what I do. So communications people or education and outreach people. We kind of get together and talk about things that other people might not care about as much. We talked about file management systems last month. It's a fascinating conversation. But we'll also share ideas about like, hey, how do you guys reach people who are outside of our region, right? Because invasive species don't come from here, they come from somewhere else. So how do we reach those people before they come here so they're not bringing things with them? We'll talk about, you know, social media tips and tricks and things like that, newsletters. So yeah, it's really fun if you're a communications person, press releases, you name it. And then there's the Lake George Hemlock Coalition. So this is something that Tamara is very involved with. And it's a group of, I don't even know how many now, Brian, 25, 30 organizations down in the Lake George area, getting together and you know, talking about strategies for hemlock woolly adelgid. And so we give them their own page on our website. You can see it here. And if you're interested, you can go on our website and click on the working groups section, and you'll find the Lake George Hemlock Coalition. But they're doing a lot of cool work where they're tracking HWA and kind of trying to come up with strategies for managing it. One thing that's been on our minds lately is increasing volunteerism. We're always thinking about that. If you came to our last partner meeting, you probably saw this or at least heard about it. So every year, DEC does a statewide hemlock woolly adelgid challenge. And we are one of 8 prisms, if you weren't aware, a partnership for regional invasive species management. If you live in New York State, you live in a prism, one of these 8 prisms. The Adirondack prism really represented this year. You can see we have the 40% of confirmed presence points and then 64% of the non-detected records. If you're not aware, when it comes to like looking for HWA, we want to know where it is, but we also want to know where it isn't. Like it's valuable just to know like, hey, somebody went out on that trail and looked and didn't find it. So it helps us just get a clearer picture of where it is and where it isn't. But, these numbers are great, but if you kind of look behind the scenes, there were a couple volunteers who went above and beyond and did a ton of monitoring, a ton of it. So we're talking, we want to keep them, don't get me wrong, but we'd love to get more people out there, more individuals out there looking at the trails. And just, if they're going hiking, they don't even have to make a special day out of it. Just to have them looking around and reporting if they do or do not see beach leaf disease or hemlock woolly adelgid. Those two invasive species are fairly new to the Adirondacks still. They're largely in the southeastern portion of the park, and they're on the move. So we really, really want to keep track of where they're at. So a couple of ways we're doing this. We made these flyers. This seems like a pretty simple thing, but we do a lot of tabling events where hundreds of people come by and talk about invasive species, being able to put something in their hand and just be like, hey, look, you're interested in, you're really into boating and fishing and things like that. Like, hey, you might want to be a lake protector. Or you're really into hiking or mountain biking or whatever. Like, hey, you might think about becoming a forest pest hunter. All you have to do is go to a training, just kind of learn a little bit about what we do, and then you can report an invasive species for us. And then, actually, I should back up here. So I don't have a picture for this because it hasn't happened yet, but I've been working with the, we did a hemlock woolly adelgid walk back in March, and it was really well attended. We had 20 people show up on a sort of rainy, snowy day in March, and then we went on this hike and we showed them how to identify HWA. One of the people was with Screw Lake Association, or it might have been the East Screw Lake Association, I'm sorry, I get them confused. But she was like, hey, I've got this lake association and there's gonna be over 50 people at this event in July. Do you wanna come and talk about forest pest hunters? So they've been lake protectors before and they've been doing that for a while, but they want to expand a little bit and start looking and getting their people out into the forests and looking for some of our forest pests. So that's awesome. We're going to have, hopefully at least 50 people at this event. I'm going to teach them all about beach leaf disease and hemlock woolly adelgid. If 5 of them go out and start monitoring, that would be a huge win. Totally worth our time. But this is kind of planting the seed in my mind of, I wonder if there's other lake associations or hiking groups or things like that who would be willing to, hey, let me talk for half an hour. I'll teach you about this stuff. And, just when you're out doing your thing, hiking that you love to do, just keep an eye out for some of these invasive pests. So that's something we're going to be looking at doing this summer and beyond. All right, so APIPP monthly newsletter. I'd love it if you'd all sign up for it, but if you're not going to open it, don't sign up for it because our open rates are really good, and I want to keep it. So far, we have an open rate of it's between like 55 and 60%. Changes every time I look at it, but that's really good. That means 55 to 60% of the people receiving it are actually opening it, and then our click-through rate, which is our people actually clicking on some of the links, is over 20%. Again, it fluctuates day to day as people interact with the email, but that's also really good. The industry standard is like low teens, so it's really good to have it well above 20%. This is something that we've been talking about doing for a while now, and we finally had a chance to kind of sit down and put it together. This one just went out in May. So I'm just going to kind of quickly go through what it looks like. I've done some screenshots, but if you were to get the email, you would see this first and you would scroll down and see this next. So every email has what I call standing sections. So the first, actually not included here, there's an introduction right here that just kind of introduces people to anything that doesn't fit elsewhere in the newsletter, and just kind of what we're thinking about, what we're looking forward to goes in that section. And then there's a species of concern, APIPP in the field, partners in the field. These sections stay the same every month. So when you open that newsletter, if you really like the species of concern, you're going to find the species of concern. You can scroll down to it. It gives people something to kind of look forward to as they see that pop up in their inbox. It also helps us write it because we don't have to reinvent the wheel every month. We have these standing sections that we're just kind of filling in, which is really nice. And these could change where we can experiment with them, but this is what they are now. So yeah, the species of concern is just a short description of a species that we're thinking about that month. Usually it's going to be something that's kind of pertinent to the time of year that we're talking about it. We just give a brief description of it, some key identification features, and of course there's always a link to learn more, which will go take you to our website. APIPP in the field is just what we're doing. We do a lot in the field. I keep saying that, but we do. We're out and about all the time, and it's really hard. You can't write a press release every time you do an event. You're going to oversaturate them, they're going to start ignoring you. So this is a really great way for us just to say like, hey, this is what we've been up to. We did this really cool event. We want you to hear about it. And then partners in the field. And this one kind of flip-flops. It could also be volunteers in the field. But it's basically like, the people who are doing this awesome work with us. We want to highlight them a little bit and just let people know, like, hey, they're out there. And again, it's all about planting seeds, like, maybe my organization could be a partner. Maybe somebody will think that when they see this. But this one, Ari did a State Department of Transportation event down in Tupper Lake. It was 2 days, right, Ari? 2 days? Yeah, a 2-day event. Yeah, and DOT is a great partner for us. So we just wanted to kind of highlight the fact that they held this awesome event and there were a lot of people there. And then we get a lot of questions. People email us questions. We get random questions when we're tabling, all sorts of things, even on Facebook. So that's where Ask APIPP comes in. So this one's about someone suggested planting winged burning bush, but I don't want to plant an invasive species. How do I know it's a plant? So this just kind of walks people through like a couple resources that they can look at. There's DEC has a native plant guide that's free to download. We also have a field guide to terrestrial invasive species of the Adirondacks, which is right here. So if you want to know if something's invasive in the Adirondacks, you can pick up one of these bad boys and it'll tell you. Yeah, then there's actually some plants that are prohibited too. So we have that booklet in there too. So it's just a nice simple way for people who are thinking about doing some landscaping to get some resources that they need and hopefully not to plant invasive species. And then we have, and in case you missed it, we get a lot of stories published and that podcast, cool things like that, webinars that we record. So they kind of go there. So anybody that maybe, or maybe our webinars aren't on their radar yet, they can check out one that they missed. And then we highlight some upcoming events. So this has been great. We've received really good feedback from the newsletter so far. I'm welcome to feedback too. If you're receiving it and you're like, hey, you thought about doing this, that would be interesting, let me know. It can be a living, breathing thing. We definitely want to make it better, but we don't want to make it too big. I think that's one of the keys to a newsletter is make it something that people are actually going to want to read. And as soon as your email starts to get this long, you lose people. So we definitely try to keep it tight and informative. Okay, one of the last things I want to talk to you about is New York's Invasive Species Awareness Week. So this is an effort that happens every year across the 8 prisms. Basically, it's about a week of events that happen all across the state. Some of them are online, some of them are in person. It's really cool. This year it's June 9th to 15th. Last year it was the first week of June, so they bumped it back a little. We'll see how that goes. Last year we did a really cool brewery event where we had Racket River Brewery do an invasive plant ale, IPA, and we had a trivia night, and that was a lot of fun. And again, it's just about mixing it up and like getting people who might not otherwise come to an invasive species webinar to learn about invasive species. This year, APIPP is doing 3 events. So here's the first 2. If you're in the Adirondack Lake area, Monday, June 9th, I believe it was Brian who was walking into the library and said they have 2 invasive species planted in their landscaping out in front of the library. It's a winged burning bush and barberry. So I met with the director of the library and was like, hey man, you can't have this. You can't have these invasive species here. We gotta do something about this before the word gets out. So no, they were really cool about it, and they were excited. We said, hey, we could do a little event. We could do maybe just like a little invasive species 101 kind of thing for half an hour, and then have people in the community help us pull the invasive species out, and then we'll plant new non-invasive species in their place. So that's going to be happening on Monday, June 9th from 4 to 5 p.m. It might go a little after 5, we'll see, but it should be a relatively short event, so it'll be informative, it'll be fun. It's a chance to help beautify your local library. And then on Wednesday, June 11th, from about 10 to noon, we're doing a Lookout for Invasives educational walk along the Wadhams Lookout Trail. You get it? And that's just going to be an invasive species walk. So we're going to teach people how to identify some invasive species. There's a bunch of them along that trail, so they'll be able to see them in person. And then they'll get to see like a cool little view. And yeah, the first one we're doing in partnership with the library, of course. This one we're doing in partnership with Essex County Soil and Water, and I think Noah's here, right? Hey, thanks for helping us out with this. And, us, and then of course the Cats Trails, Champlain Area Trails. This is the Wadhams Trail is one of their trails, so they're going to be helping us out too. But yeah, it should be a pretty fun, laid back kind of thing where we just kind of enjoy a walk in the woods and talk about invasive species. And then the last but not least, this was generally kind of a partner thing that we did. But we opened it up to the public for Invasive Species Awareness Week, Boquet River Nature Preserve Invasive Species Training, kind of similar to the Wadhams Walk. And Ari is going to be leading this one, so it should be awesome. And that's gonna happen at the Boquet River Preserve, which is a TNC Nature Conservancy Preserve. It's beautiful there, but there are a bunch of invasive species. If you wanna learn about a lot of invasive species, this is the one to go to. And these are all on our events page, so you just adkinvasives.com/events. And these are all free, they're all totally free. And that one's gonna go from 10 to 2, so that one's a little bit longer, it'll be a little more in-depth than the Bottoms Lookout one. And there is a rain date, just so you know, like if it's thunder and lightning on Monday, we're gonna do this one on Tuesday, you know, and the same thing, on Wednesday, we'll move it to Thursday. You'll see that when you signed up for it, but yeah, unless the weather's horrible, we'll just move ahead. And don't miss the first Lake Protectors training of 2025. It's the virtual training, and there will be 2 in-person trainings. So this one's on June 24th, Tuesday, June 24th from 9 to 11. It'll be virtual. We will do 2 in-person ones over the summer. One will be in July, and one will be August. Those are, excuse me, to be determined, but they will be happening. All right, there we go. Yeah, learn more or register for an event, adkinvasives.com/events. And you can always go to our YouTube channel too, if you want to watch any recordings of our past events. Oh, and last but not least, yes, our outreach materials, we have a selection over there. Help yourselves, they're all free. Our field guides are really cool if you don't have one yet. You can also order them. So if you have an organization, you're going to an event, whatever, let me know. There's an order form online. Order as many as you want. I'll send them to you. It's all free. And yeah, they cover aquatics, they cover terrestrials, and there's Don't Move Firewood too. And that's all I've got. Does anyone have any questions about communications? Yes.
Can our lake association reproduce your press releases, or do we need permission?
Oh, yeah.
Can we just put a link in our
absolutely
monthly newsletter?
Yeah, and we put our press releases online too on our website.
Okay, I want to make sure we didn't need permission to do that.
No, not at all. I actually appreciate you doing that.
Okay.
Yeah, if there's anything you need, like a photo or something, just reach out to me and let me know. Yeah. Any other questions? I can talk all day.
One thing that we've learned, we get questions, I think I have it's invasive, and what we found is some people don't know the difference between a spruce, a pine, or an apple tree.
Yeah.
You might want to think about adding some of that into.
Well, so
explain what a hemlock looks like.
A lot of these talks I start with, I call it like a plant ID 101 type thing. So I go over opposite versus alternate, you know, twig patterns or leaf patterns. Yeah, and I go over things like how to identify a hemlock, and we actually have I don't know, Brian, did you bring any of the cards? We actually have some cheat sheet cards too now for hemlocks. Yeah, that we need to get printed. But yeah, but a lot of times I do start because you know, not everyone understands plant IDs. You're talking about how, oh, this has alternate leaves, and not everyone knows what that means. So I think it's really useful to start with just a real basic plant ID. Yeah. All right. Anybody else? Cool. Well, thank you. All right, take it away. All right, the down button is advanced, oddly.
Well, I appreciate it. Good to see so many folks that I've already met. For those I haven't, Ari Uihlein Farm, the terrestrial invasive species manager. Thinking of the date, around 14 months, over a year in. And from last April to now, I'm so excited to be in this room, in this region, working with all of you. Such important work to protect Adirondack lands and waters, and I'm going to introduce the crew I'm working with APIPP in a second, but there's no way that this work could get done without partnership with so many people, and it's really a pleasure to be working with all of you. Can't have the team here today. Rebecca's downstate, but Rebecca Tamanya is on the crew for her 4th season as the invasive species steward, doing a lot of campground control, but surveying and control of invasive species and increasingly forest pests throughout the region. So we're so happy to have her on the team. Reed Middendorf was the assistant last year, but this year we're welcoming Rhoda Peterson, who's a recent grad from Paul Smith's college. So she's actually out looking for swallowwort, one of the emerging species I'm going to dive into today. But yeah, it's an amazing group of people to work with. And we also have a contract crew that did a ton of work last year and hoping to work with them again this year. That's where when I was talking with DOT folks, they cover a lot of rights of way. You can see our sort of spaghetti map here of different routes. They covered 57 different routes last year, but they're also a great resource for helping with some of the heavy lifting, early detection, rapid response projects, like Tree of Heaven and Japanese stiltgrass. A big part of what I thought I would do today is show you a bunch of pictures of plants. For the folks in person, I'm sure driving in, or maybe it's just me, but the leaves are coming out and it's so exciting. Spring is here. It's doesn't feel like that today necessarily, but it's both exciting planting gardens, hopefully with native plants. For me in APIPP land, making sure these early phenology, mile a minute gets pulled before it goes to seed. Swallowwort that we find where these populations are so we can scope the best projects. So I'm incredibly excited to hit the ground running and have a safe and productive field season. But I want to work with all of you, different agencies, citizens, all over the Adirondacks and beyond. So I thought, show you what I'm up to and then ask for help. Please keep an eye out for these plants. A lot of them are pretty limited in their distribution in the Adirondacks. So can we contain, can we eradicate? A lot of that's dictated by what's actually on the ground. And that's where I can use all the help. In terms of just transporting the plants around and trying to limit the spread, Sean did a great job of covering this. I've really enjoyed getting out, trying to educate as many people as I can. That DOT presentation in Tupper Lake was great. Germinal hazards of species like hogweed, definitely something to keep an eye out for. I hope to make it to the library event. Really excited for that bouquet event on the 12th. And yeah, be in touch. I'm still working through all the fine details of regulatory and pesticide information, but I may have the answers. If not, I might be able to direct you to people that can. But yes, emerging plants. Wanted to dive into particular species. A lot of these were in the eradication containment stage, we think. Their distribution is pretty limited, but the more eyes we can get out, the better. So some of the clonal trees are pretty limited, but it's Japanese Angelica tree and Tree of Heaven, sort of like aspens where they grow in these clonal colonies. So with Japanese Angelica tree, you have the compound leaves. This inflorescence is definitely a unique identifier, but goodness gracious, the thorns are what caught my eye at the property in Warren County. But thank you to partners like Soil Water Conservation Districts. They came across this and alerted me. And so with partnership with them and the landowner, certainly going to contain this, if not eradicate. Really excited to continue this project. And then with Tree of Heaven, Olympus, the tree grows in Brooklyn, was referring to this tree. Pretty generalist with its habitat, like growing in a sidewalk crack in that story, or cobble of old like mine tailings potentially. So the control, it might not be as simple as just cutting it down. Resprouts are definitely a concern. But when I'm driving around, there's going to be a slide of what sumac looks like. A lot of times I'm like, oh, there's Tree of Heaven everywhere. It might not be as widespread as you think. These teeth right at the base of the leaf are a really good identifier. And then if you crush out the leaf and smell it, it's very different than sumac. Rotten peanut butter is how I would describe it. Not awful, but not pretty, not great. And these are called samaras. The helicopter seeds are samaras. So that's how these seeds are distributed. Right now, it's mostly in the southern Lake George area, potentially east into Vermont. So the most eyes we could get on this, the better. Up beyond a farm in that general area in Baldwin Landing, and then south by Dunham's Bay is where we've spotted these so far. Hadlock Pond, Fort A.
But also good to point out, you can see it anywhere from like where it's in that like bushy stage in that top middle picture to like the trunk of that tree is, bigger than our technician saying there. I mean, these can be, really large mature trees, which causes some issues.
Definitely.
Sorry, those are two different species you have on the screen. Can you talk about the second species, spotted lanternfly?
Ah, we have spotted lanternfly.
In your title already?
Oh, yes, yes. So there's gonna be more like, thank you, more detailed pictures of spotted lanternfly down the line. But certainly in spots downstate, capital region and south where spotted lanternfly, a forest pest is more established. Ailanthus is like the host plant, the preferred host plant for spotted lanternfly. So as both of these species move north in the state, I do suspect that spotted lanternfly might gravitate to areas of tree of heaven. So eyes out for tree of heaven, definitely an important thing, and it could also help potentially like intercept introductions of spotted lanternfly. And yeah, thank you to partners that are helping trap for spotted lanternfly. It definitely ties in. Less in the tree category and more in the understory category is Japanese stiltcrafts. This is a fairly widespread, fairly difficult to control species that is not very established in the Adirondacks yet. So with partners like the Lake George Land Conservancy and some areas on state land, we are definitely going to increase surveying and treatment of the known populations of this plant. This off-center silvery midrib is a really key identifier here. So again, mostly Lake George, but we don't know until we know. So if you're seeing clumps of grasses, especially in disturbed areas, check that silvery midrib, take as detailed pictures as you can in IMAP. If you're not sure, the more details, the better. And then myself or other staff, we're happy to review it and check out. Wineberry is another one that we're going to get out to mechanically control soon. It might look similar to folks, and it's in that same rubus, that berry family. It can cane, so as it grows tall and gravity takes hold, it can reset new roots. So definitely can form dense clusters. That's what we're seeing it on Long Island Campground in Lake George. But after 1 year of mechanical control in 2024, we're excited to go back over the next month. I do suspect to see some regrowth, but it was limited. And this is a project we're really excited to continue. These are the actual pictures from the campground. Swallowwort, thank you to Rhoda for getting out to the westernmost Adirondacks to find an emerging population of this today, do some mechanical control. This is a concern for us because it mimics the habitat for monarch butterfly, milkweed plants. So this is something in terms of pollinator habitat that is a concern. And these seeds are wind dispersed. So we have until like early mid-July until these black or white flowers turn into seeds. So it's an early phenology species that we're going to be focusing on for the next month. Knotweed, we're excited to continue prioritize knotweed treatments and work in partnership with other contractors. Like the Adirondack Research Invasive Species Management Initiative, they have grant money and are able to assist private landowners in these immediate communities. We also updated our contractor list on APIPP's website. So if you're looking for help with control of more wild species like knotweed, that's definitely something where I can help steer you in the right direction. And this injection is like also, we have best management guides online for how you can inject herbicide targeted at individual stems of the plant. This is an effective control technique. Purple loosestrife is another species. Now we're moving into a bit more widespread with plants. But if you're finding emerging plants before it turns into this monoculture, even if you can't pull them out, a thought is just to deadhead the flowers. There's over 3 million seeds per flower stalk of these. So if you can just remove the flowers, it's a good stopgap before the populations become more established. These clasping leaves in the square stem are really key identifiers if these plants aren't in flower. I'm also excited to continue the biocontrol collection and release. Might not eradicate patches, but certainly contains them. You need over a ½ acre. So the specifics of the site really matter, but we are finding sustaining populations of these beetles year after year. So this really gives me hope for non-chemical options. Other partners are doing this too in the region. So please reach out if you'd like more details about purple loosestrife biocontrols. Some forest pests that I'm going to cover pretty quickly here, but thank you to Dom and so many of the forest pest hunters from this past season. We had an extremely successful forest pest hunter winter 2025 survey season. Over 1,000 non-detect points gives me hope that it's not completely widespread in the region, and a lot of our positive detections along the shelf area. And then also at Lake Sacandaga gives us direction in terms of where our targeted surveys will continue. Thank you, of course, to so many partners in the Lake George Hemlock Coalition, the New York State Hemlock Coalition. There's a lot of great work being done here that gives me hope that we're not going to lose this tapstone species. Sean told me down this forward. Beech leaf disease surveys won't be happening until later in the summer. I'm showing data points from last year. While we did find beech leaf disease expanding west into like the Pole Hill and Patton Thomas area west of Lake George, I really want to point out all these TAM points are non-detect. So like Sean was saying, there's a lot of value in knowing, unfortunately, where beech disease is, where it's spreading fairly rapidly, but also where it isn't. And this really helps us hone in on where the best places are to look. With emerald ash borer, we're doing some really exciting projects. But if you're out looking for emerald ash borer damage, I'd say now is really the time in our region. It's certainly moving from the south and then the Champlain Valley, both from the St. Lawrence and from Warren County. So sort of closing in on the interior. Once you see these larval galleries, there's probably already a fair amount of damage to the tree. Before you like be right at a tree looking for that, what I'd look for is flagging branches. So you have the canopy and the main branches coming out of the top. If you're seeing leaves die back from there, maybe water sprouts, epicormic branching coming from the trunk of the tree, bark peeling off, blonding. That's where I'd like look for these more specific signs for emerald ash borer, these D-shaped exit holes, these galleries. And that really is going to help us delineate where the spread is. And then once more damage is done, I mean, major dieback, woodpecker hole, all signs to sort of hone in on where the actual insect is. So that's part of what we're doing with the APIPP team. We're putting out a number of these emerald ash borer traps to delineate where the spread is, and working on a biocontrol project. The past 2 seasons, we've seen the release of 3 different species of biocontrol beetles. This is in partnership with the USDA. And now we're using yellow pan traps the next 2 seasons to trap insects in that area and hopefully see if they established or not. The goal here is not to eradicate emerald ash borer, unfortunately, but I do think that biocontrols can keep their populations in check, and that's going to allow for the long-term survival of the species as they regenerate over time. Now, here's the pretty forest pest, the spotted lanternfly we were talking about before. Definitely something to keep an eye as it goes north into this region, potentially. The adult is the most like poster child stage, but these nymphs are also spotted lanternfly. If you see them, I think the guidance is still to dispatch, but save them. I don't think that there's been any live spotted lanternfly in the region, but knowing it's to our south, knowing that these eggs can get transported on like human structures, cars, trains, trucks, definitely a species we want to keep an eye out for. And thank you to, I think now we have 11 traps with different partners. So thank you so much to the partners that are keeping an eye out for this as well. I also want to be a resource, like when I'm talking about emerald ash borer and these different things moving into the region, certainly on your own property or on public property, keeping an eye out, reporting an IMAP invasives is incredibly helpful. But I want to be a resource for like larger landowners and municipalities. What do we do if we have a lot of ash street trees or ash, different trees that are going to be imperiled on public land? I don't think that we need to necessarily cut them all down, but if there's some that are right within striking distance of structures, it's going to be a thought process that I think a lot of people are going to have to go through. So the general structure of inventory, know what you have, know what the risks are, what your budget is, what the plan. These projects can seem pretty daunting, but they're very important. And I think being proactive is extremely important. So I'm happy to be a resource. I think a lot of things through like the New York State Hemlock Initiative just came out with a new homeowners guide. yeah, I'm happy to be a resource. So through our website and different partners, I think this is gonna be an important thing going forward.
Do you think the insecticide is effective to save certain segments?
Yes, so like ash trees as an example, I do think injecting systemic pesticides, or with hemlocks, a lot of that's going on in the Lake George region. I do think that it is an effective method. The issue is the scale over 6.5 million acres, or the town that has a lot of ash trees in a public park. So I think like all of the approaches in the toolbox are important ones, and depending on the context, the budget, so many factors, there's not a one size fits all approach. But I think a lot of like the different things we're talking about in combination can set us all up for success. Yeah, to be continued here, but certainly be in touch. I want to support with projects like this. But then for folks that don't own a bunch of street trees or public lands, how you can help, please keep an eye out. IMAP invasives. We have detailed trainings about this online. But something I wanted to give a shout out to DEC is their interactive trail map. It's the interactive mapper. If you Google that, you can toggle on and off so many layers. And maybe it's just me as a map nerd, but I am a fan of this for planning fun hikes, paddles, mountain bike rides, searching for invasive plants. So for something like Emerald Ash Borer, you can go on IMAP invasives, sort of see where the current distribution is. And then if you're planning a hike, I mean, everything you could want. Where do you park? What kind of trail is it? You can turn on the satellite imagery. Where are the hemlock? Where are the conifer trees versus hardwood stands? And then download it on your phone where it's geo-referenced. You can be a blue dot. So this is something that I was not aware of when I started, and it's a very cool tool. Certainly not necessary for getting out in the woods, but wanted to make sure everybody was aware of it. Whether you're having fun paddling or having fun looking for plants. I'm excited that it's spring. I hope I have some good information for everybody, and thank you so much.
Does anybody have any questions? Sorry. If you're online and you have a question, feel free to type it into the chat.
I had a question about when you showed the picture of injecting the herbicide. And so does that, you have to do that for every individual stem, or is like one injection and cover multiple plants?
Yes, for the knotweed. That is for individual stems. And in between the second and third node. And then you calibrate the machine. So it's a lot of effort. A lot of them come with an orange marker. I tend to mark them in a cardinal direction so I can keep track. But I really like that it's a lower volume application, especially like in that ideal treatment window, late summer, fall. That knotweed could be over 10 feet tall. So doing that foliar treatment, you get a little more risk as an applicator. I really like that injection is, you're still using chemical, but it's a lot more contained and lower volume.
What's the size dose per stem? Do you know? Is it? No.
Just a few milliliters.
The hollow stem.
Yeah, it doesn't have to fill it. Well, I'll be around all season if there's not more questions now. Again, so happy to be working with all of you. I think I hand it off to Brian Green.
Awesome, well, yeah, big thanks to Ari and all of our partners here. We have a lot of partners who help out with doing the management of our terrestrial species. And I think like Ari said, there's definitely some interesting stuff going on with the forest pests. And we are trying to get a better handle of, where those forest pests are. And so your eyes and ears out on there really help us in putting in IMAP as a great resources. So I'm kind of hopefully wrapping up like the last of my aquatic invasive species roles. We're very excited that hopefully in June, we're gonna have 2 new people starting on the aquatic side. We'll have an aquatic seasonal starting and a new AIS manager. So be on the lookout for our June newsletter. We'll hopefully be introducing some new staff. Dom, you can sneak on by if you want to sneak on back. It's fine. Dom's also one of my great helpers. He goes out and does a ton of the lake protector stuff. So I'm gonna kind of give you a preview of what we're gonna do in 2025, and then I'm gonna share some results from what we did an eDNA project. Yeah, so we're gonna go over our main things: lake protectors, lake management tracker. We'll talk about the Lake Champlain boat launch and our milfoil management, water quality, and then some of the early detection surveys, and then I'll have a bigger chunk on the eDNA monitoring. So Lake Protectors is our flagship program since 2002, getting people like Ev and Dom and other people in this room out to go through there and look for this. Our, like we said before, our virtual protector virtual training is June 24th, so people can sign up and attend that. And we'll also have in-person one, like this is the one we did at SUNY ESF at the Newcomb at the Adirondack Interpretive Center. So we'll hopefully be having 2 of these, one in July and one in August. Also, this is a picture of Beth right here with the DEC. She's doing a lot of library events that are trainings on aquatic invasive species identification. So like 20-some different libraries all across the Adirondacks and outside the Adirondacks. If you go on our website or you go on the DEC website, you can find where they are. So lots of cool opportunities to learn more. And we try to bring live plants because, you know, like Ev said, people can't tell the difference between an apple tree and a hemlock tree. Well, they can't tell the difference between a native pondweed and an invasive pondweed, or Eurasian water, milfoil, and water chestnut. So it's really helpful to get to see all of them. So if you want to become a lake protector, you attend a training, you choose a lake to adopt, and then you go out and survey once a season between July and September. You know, usually people are just spending like 1 to 2 hours out on, maybe it's like their favorite lake they like to paddle, or their one right in front of their house. If you're on a really big lake like Spoon Lake or Lake George, you don't have to do the whole entire lake, you just do a section of it, and then you report back to APIPP and on the IMAP app if you see something or if you don't see something, which is, like we said, is also important. So we'd love to have more and more people help this. I think this is a really easy way. If you love your lake, you can get out there and get back and do this. Every lake association should be doing annual monitoring for aquatic invasive species. And even if you do have an aquatic invasive species like Eurasian water milfoil or variable leaf milfoil, you still want to prevent new invasives and new things, and so you still want to keep a lookout. Our lake management tracker program. This is a program for communities that are managing. Most of them are managing invasive milfoils, and we help them set monitoring points. So they go out and they do a yearly census of milfoil on their lake. So basically they go to the same point every single summer at the height of the growing, and then they do an assessment to see is it, you know, essentially low, medium, or high abundance. And by doing this over time, we can create a dashboard that helps track the spread and the abundance of it. And this is really useful because a lot of these lakes are doing management. And so they want to know, like, hey, we're spending all this money trying to hand harvest it or do chemical management and do things. Are we seeing results from it? We're starting to get to the place now where we've had lakes being in this for, you know, 5, 6, 7 years now. So we can actually really start to see some of those results. And we're actually starting to get a fair amount of the lakes that are in this are having success stories because they're using this as part of a adaptive management strategy. So here's one. This is from Paradox Lake. This is looking at the upper section of Paradox Lake. So they started in 2019, and when they first started doing it, there's only about a little bit over 10% of it had Eurasian water milfoil in it. And despite them doing hand harvesting and other different things, they saw that really quickly from 2019 to 2021 to 2023, it increased to almost over 60% of their upper basin. So despite their doing management, the data was showing them, hey, we're going in the wrong direction. We're not getting what we wanted. So we started discussions with them, and the Lake Association was very proactive, saying we needed to change our management strategy. So in 2024, they switched to using a chemical management strategy up there. And this is what they saw in 2024. They were able to see that only one site out of all their sites that they monitored in the upper basin had
Eurasian water milfoil in this. So this is a good example of where they were able to kind of use the data and say, hey, it's not working, we need to do something different, and then the data shows, hey, we did something different, and it seems like it's working a lot better. So yeah, well, we had 9 different lakes participate. I think we had like 1,700 observations. We'd love to have other lake associations. We even have some lake associations that do not have that are not actually doing management, which is kind of a new area for us. So we're trying to understand like what's the do nothing option. And so we have a couple lakes that are in that. So yeah, if you have milfoil and you want to do a long-term monitoring of it, I highly recommend this lake management tracker program. We provide the resources, the technology, the app, the training. You provide the people power to go out there and survey your lake. I'm not gonna talk a lot about this, but we're on the 3rd and final year of our Lake Champlain boat launch project. I've given a couple talks about this. I think I talked a little bit about it at our end of year partner one. But we're gonna be working we have 5 boat launches in the Adirondacks from Ticonderoga up to Port Douglas, where we've been doing management and we've been tracking, working with Paul Smith College, AWI, the boat stewards that are there, tracking what's coming in and going out of it through there. So we have 1 more season where we're going to be doing that. So we're looking forward to seeing how those results continue to play out. And then we're also in the 2nd year of a milfoil management and water quality project. This is kind of an interesting one where we've started to get people asking us questions like, hey, how does like managing milfoil impact the water quality? And honestly, there's not a lot of really good data out there nationally about this. We have really good data about the impacts of managing milfoil on plants, but we haven't really done as much stuff on water quality. So I've seen a couple other things with SUNY Adirondack had done something, and some of my other partners said, oh, well, let's kind of look at what we can do here in the Adirondacks. And interestingly enough, 5 of our lake associations that we've been working with a long time that have been managing milfoil have also been taking part in the Adirondack Lake Assessment Program, which is called APIPP, partnership between Protect the Adirondacks and Paul Smith College AWI. And so they've been monitoring using that, said, hey, let's kind of use that data set that you have and let's kind of expand that to not just include the traditional deep water monitoring place, but also shallow water monitoring places where we're doing management. Our null hypothesis is that there should be no long-term water quality impacts from hand harvesting, dash, or chemical management. But hopefully now we'll have a little bit more data. We can look at this. So we're just starting to get some of last year's data that trickled in. I just went out last week and did our first sample on Middle Saranac Lake of the season. So people are going out this week to go do these others. So big thanks to all the different lake associations that are working with us on this. So hopefully maybe at the end of this year or end of next year, we'll be able to show some of the data, what we're learning.
Is that Fallsby Pond?
Yep, Fallsby Pond is part of it's our reference site. So
But it doesn't have milfoil in it.
there's no milfoil in it. So that's the no management one. So Middle Saranac has it, but they're doing no management of it. These ones, Caroga is doing a mixture of dash and chemical management, a mixture of chemical and hand harvesting, dash, chemical and hand harvesting, and just hand harvesting for these ones. And then Middle Saranac has milfoil, but they're doing no management, and then Fallsby has no invasives, and it's like a reference lake that we're going through.
Brian, what analytes are you analyzing for, and are you taking profile data?
No the ALAB program is not profile data.
Okay.
It's just a 2-meter integrated sample, and they have a suite of like 25 different, standard ones like, nitrates, connectivity, pH, dissolved organic material. There's a chlorophyll A. We do a chlorophyll A filter sample and a Secchi disc reading. Yeah, so they just have a set program. It was kind of interesting. We were designing this. One of the reasons I was looked at it, we went with the ALAP program. One was because these lakes had all been it, so we have like this longer data set we can go to. And then also I didn't want to stand up do my own
water quality monitoring and different things so that then if this thing really works or we get some interesting data from it, that then we have to kind of keep going. Like, so there's an existing program that any lake can participate in there. I'm a big fan of the ALAP and CFLAP programs. So I highly encourage all lake associations not only to be doing annual monitoring of their invasives, they also need to be doing annual monitoring of their water quality. So those are two great programs. And then our staff goes out and we do early detection surveys where we try to prioritize lakes that we think are high risk, looking for things that we don't know yet. This is where our partner organizations, they also help out a lot. Volunteers also help with this. So we would love to have more people be out on the water body and be looking for invasive species. Okay, so that's kind of what's coming, but this is now like kind of what's looking back. So I recently gave like this presentation at the NICE-FOLA to the New York State Federation of Lake Associations. And then last spring at our spring partner meeting, I talked about what we learned in the 2023 season from ED&A. So I thought it was good to kind of follow up with everybody here in the Adirondacks and sort of like, this is what we kind of learned in our 2024 season. Because I don't know, you raise your hand if you're a kid, you spend a lot of your time outside doing things like this. Yeah, so this was me. This is not actually, was not me. It would have been a black and white photo if it was me. But I spent a lot of time doing it, and you'll see two things from this photo that I think are really important about searching for things. So what's the two key things that this child is doing?
Being out there.
Okay, well, that's what was I think, but yeah, being out there, one. They're doing two key things when we're out looking for things everybody should be doing.
Your child has a tool.
They have a tool, that's right. Tools are really important for looking for things, especially invasive species. And then they're also doing something else.
Feeling.
They're being observed. They're like, they're putting a lot of time and like some effort to it. So, you know, those are the two things I take away from this picture. And the tool is definitely a big thing that a lot of people don't always mention about it. I really like to go birding now because I'm an old middle-aged person. So, so you know, I use binoculars. I'm like out and looking at binoculars all the time. A lot of times I'm out and I'm like looking through my binoculars and I know there are birds there, but I can't see them. How do I know they're there if I can't see them?
Good hearing.
That's right, I can hear them. And so maybe my binoculars isn't the best tool, and I need to be using something else. Has anyone ever used the Merlin app? All right, yeah, my wife says this is the best use of AI. It's the only reason she takes her phone outside. So you can use this app through Cornell University where you can just hit recording and in real time it is identifying the species of birds that you're hearing. So in many places, birding by ear is a better tool for observing the species than my binoculars. Another thing about observing invasive species, raise your hand if you can see the invasive species in this photo. Yeah, it's pretty easy to be able to find like a 10-acre patch of water chestnut. Okay, raise your hand if you can see the invasive species in this photo. What species is it, Tom?
Is it frog bit?
Yeah, you see there's a little bit of frog bit right around there. You know, so finding things at really high abundances for a lot of people, it's not really hard, but it's also not super useful. Because like Ari was talking about with our prevention curve, when we're really trying to do something, we want to find it at the really low abundance because we're much more likely to be able to eradicate it. And also it's going to cost a lot less. You know, when we get up to this upper end of the scale, we're not really able to, you know, and sometimes we're not able to do some things or it's just almost too cost prohibitive for it. So what I'm always trying to ask is, what is the right tool for the job? And really, what methods can help us find aquatic invasive species at really small populations? So these are our traditional tools for monitoring AIS. Many of them have used and done these things. So visual, you go out on a boat, on the water, and you are, you know, looking to see anything. So it can be fast, you can cover a large area. but, you know, it is time and labor intensive, you need people out there, because people need to have specialized knowledge, they need to be able to know what they're seeing. And then also, you know, it's only good for areas that you can see, so if the water's not too clear, or, you know, it's too deep, or different things like this, you know, you're not gonna be able to see things. Break off, it's a really cheap piece of equipment. It's 2 garden rakes tied together on the end of a rope. You throw it down in the water and you pull it back in and you collect all sorts of plants. It's good for submerged plants. Like sometimes you can see a plant under the water, but you can't really identify it. You throw it in, you're able to bring it into your boat. Oh, I now I see what it is. It's also part of that standardized point intercept monitoring, or PIM. It can be labor intensive, but you need specialized knowledge. And it's also biased towards plants that are large, you know, a lot of the small plants might not come up with it, so there's a bias in that. Your rake size, also interesting work from our sister Prism and Finger Lakes. 14 inches is the ideal size for a rake garden. The rake size does actually matter. Sediment sieves, so you can use your a small mesh sieve to go into the gravel and pull up. You can find things like mussels, invasive mussels, zebra mussels, quagga mussels, invasive snails. So it's good for them, but that's about the only species it's good for, and you can only sample that really small area that you're with. Plankton tow, kind of easy to use. It's this net right here. You can put it out the end of your boat, you can tow it through there, it's kind of collecting all the water. It's good for looking at zooplankton, so we're looking for like fish hook water flea or spiny water flea. It's good to see. Once again, limited taxa, and also you can't always reach where you need to. The zooplankton, they're not evenly distributed throughout the water columns. They move up and down and different things like that. So you might not, even if they're in there, you might be able to catch them in your nets. Like fishing, just because I throw a net out and try to catch something doesn't mean, if I catch nothing, doesn't mean there's no fish in there. There's also some newer methods for monitoring AIS. So sonar, so you can have a boat where it has a sonar on it. You know, it's a useful tool. If like you're really good at like reading your sonar, and the sonars keep getting better and better. You can be going over the water and you can't see the bottom, but your sonar can detect something, and so you can say like, oh, I can tell there's a plant there through my sonar, and then like I can throw a rake and like pull it up or something. You can also cover a large area quickly. There's also some software that you can use that you can then take that data and then use it to like give you some interpolations. But the downside is that it just tells you there's plants. You don't know if it's a native plant or an invasive plant. And you also need certain types of equipment and software. And then eDNA monitoring, we've been doing more and more of this. The positives is it's relatively easy to collect samples, and you can do some methods where you can be looking for multiple species at a time. The negatives is, you know, you got to pay per sample. It can be pretty costly. And essentially it's giving you just a snapshot, like you're getting a collection of water. It's just whatever is in that water on that day at that time. So and that where you are, you'll see what kind of matters a fair amount. So we've been working with Cornell University and doing our eDNA and genomics lab. So we use a multiplex assay that tests over 50 different species, so animals and for plants. Basically, we're collecting a little filter of water, we're putting it through and amplifying it, we're putting it through a PCR machine, and then we're sequencing it and running it through a computer to say like, okay, these are the species that we find in there. So our question was, how would eDNA monitoring compare to traditional monitoring for aquatic invasive species? So we did 10 lakes. So we had 2 teams, one that went out and did the traditional sampling, 2 people surveyed a water body, 1 day on the water at each lake in July. And then in the eDNA sampling, we did 2 sampling periods, once in July and once again in September. There's some research that shows that it's better to do in September for plants. We collected 4 samples from 4 locations, so 8 total locations, 8 total samples with an additional replicate and a field blank for some quality control. So we did 1 at the public access, 1 at a known area where we knew there was aquatic invasive species, 1 at an unknown area where we had not mapped any invasive species, and then 1 in the open water for them. We filtered 1 liter of water and put it into a thing and then send it off to the lab.
We did this on 10 different lakes, all across the Adirondacks. So, we worked with a lot of different lake associations to help do this. So if you're one of these lake associations, like, yeah, we gotta follow up, talk about what the results were, for Scroon. But we went out and did this last year. So I can't go through all the lakes. There is some like specific, like lake by lake, parts of it. I'll kind of give you three that kind of tells the story. So Lake Colby, it's in Saranac Lakes, my kids' favorite place to go swimming. This is where they love to be in the summertime. It has 3 known invasive species: banded mystery snail, Chinese mystery snail, and Eurasian water milfoil. And okay, so we sent a team out. Traditional, they found Eurasian water milfoil in 6 locations. Our eDNA found Eurasian water milfoil in 1 location, curly pondweed in 1 location, and zebra mussel in two locations. So here's the map results. So these purple hash, that's where the team mapped them for Eurasian water milfoil. These blue dots are where we took the samples from. So yay, the Eurasian water milfoil, and just one of the single samples right here said it had Eurasian water milfoil there. It also said it had curly pondweed there. Now curly pondweed is an invasive species that has a unique life stage where generally in the here in the Adirondacks by like June, it's already going dormant. You don't really see it. We're suspecting that most of these curly pondweeds that we got positives are not positives for curly pondweed, Potamogeton crispus, but they're positives for native pondweeds, other Potamogetons that are there through this. So that's an interesting thing to remember. We also got 2 positives for zebra mussels right in here. We have no known populations of zebra mussels in there. We haven't seen them. So what does that mean? Well, that can mean a couple things. A, something's wrong with the test. Maybe the test isn't working right. B, maybe there is genetic presence of zebra mussel there, but no viable adults there, or maybe there is somehow a viable adult did get in there, but it can't like reproduce. So one of the things about these eDNA tests is sometimes they are just telling you like, hey, we just have the presence of it. There then has to be some follow. We don't really think there is. You know, that there can be some other ways. They were also at very low copy levels. So just something to think about when you bring up these results. All right, Lake Alice. This is in Clinton County. It's a shallow impoundment of a brook, and it's just, I don't know, 8 feet deep at its deepest, just like solid wall of plants. It has more invasive. You want to see invasive plants, this is a great place to go. Known ones are European frogbit, Eurasian water milfoil, and water chestnut. Here you can see some water chestnut right through there. Okay, so the team found European frogbit, 13 locations, Eurasian water milfoil, 13 locations, and water chestnut in 2 locations. The eDNA found Eurasian in 2 locations and curly pondweed in 2 locations. So these yellow outlines is where you find the European frogbit. It's all around the edges of through there. We did tests all right around there and didn't get any positives from European frogbit for that. We also did these hatched areas are the water chestnut. We're testing right by where the water chestnut is, no positives with that. We did get positives from Eurasian water milfoil in this where the crosshatch where they are in here, and also in the very open, which is one of the few areas that doesn't have it. And then once again, we got these curly leaf pondweed. We have no curly leaf pondweed known to be in here, but there are lots of native, extensive native pondweeds in there. Interesting, like one of the things you'll see about the test. So here we are sampling right here. Here's Dana out there. There's the filter right there. Can you see what plant this is right here? Everybody identify it? This thing, guy. Yeah, it looks like Vario because it grows so dense. It's Eurasian water milfoil. So sometimes when you're out there doing the sample, the filter, you're filtering like right on top of the plant. You know, like I can see it. It's all around us. But then 6 months later, you get the test back and it says, no Eurasian water milfoil. So it's an interesting thought to think about. There's lots of times when we're out testing this that we can visually see it right next to us, but the test result does not show it. There's a lot of things about plants. Plants have these waxy cuticle cell walls. They are holding in their genetic material much better than these dirty mussels and fish and other things that are just, spewing out all sorts of cells in multiple different ways. So yeah. All right, Lake Champlain. This is testing at Port Henry. It's a large lake with a popular boat launch, 16 known aquatic invasive species in Lake Champlain. Great one to do eDNA testing on because there's just so many different fish and plants and animals things. So hopefully you get to kind of see something. Okay, so here we go. First glance, traditional. They found curly pondweed at one location and they found Eurasian water milfoil at one location. And okay, our eDNA, curly pondweed at one location, Eurasian water at one location. Well, but we also found fishhook water fillies, zebra mussels, Brazilian waterweed, and sacred lotus right there, 2 locations. So we've done a lot of mapping at this place. We do a lot of work at Port Henry, so we have a pretty good idea of where they were. Here's where the Eurasian population was mapped. Here's where the curly leaf population was mapped by the team. Our eDNA found curly leaf and Eurasian right here, so it's good, yay, the Eurasian right where we know it. Well, it also didn't find the Eurasian right here where we monitored, and also didn't find curly leaf pondweed in the one area we did monitor it up there. Found fishhook water flea in these 2 locations, so that's interesting to see. Fishhook water flea is known to be in there. And then we found zebra mussels all over there. So you can notice that our team didn't report zebra mussels or fishhook water flea. So fishhook water flea, once again, you're doing a plankton tow, you may or may not get it, but for the eDNA it was there. Zebra mussel, that was just a mistake the team made. And I think it's a good thing to kind of point out, is like we knocked the eDNA monitoring like a lot, like, oh, it didn't get it, like why didn't it get it right? Well, people also make mistakes. Like people don't, get everything exactly right too. So it was a good lesson to kind of learn. Oh, I don't have a typo here. It's not scared lotus. It's actually sacred lotus. But you should be scared of it because so we got these 2 positive, Brazilian waterweed and sacred lotus, one right here and one right out here. Brazilian waterweed kind of looks like Eladia. We don't really have any things. Could it possibly be there? We'll follow up more. Don't think so. Sacred lotus is like again, like this really large leaf and this really showy flower. Like, I don't really think that sacred lotus is in there and like nobody's seen it. It's kind of hard to hide this. So I think it's just an example of the testing, that there's some ways that the testing might not be 100% accurate. And so I think that's an important thing to remember. So in summary, here's kind of our take home from this. Here's all the 10 ones that we did. Here's our previously known AIS that was here. This is what the traditional team found. And then this is what the eDNA found, the number of species in there. Lake Alice was the only one that we got a 100% on, where the 3 known ones were found by the traditional team on there. You can see, some species found, more or less. Yeah, so it's kind of a little bit all over the place. And then when you look at just by species now, so the traditional team found out of the 10 water bodies, all 10 had Eurasian water milfoil. They found it on 9 out of 10. The eDNA only found it on 6 of the 10 through there. You can see that traditional does better with the plants, less so with the animals. You get a higher ones with there. Kind of put asterisks behind like curly pondweed, the lotus, the Brazilian waterweed, zebra mussels. These ones were generally, when we look at the results from the lab, at very, very low concentrations. So sometimes you kind of got to take some of those with a grain of salt. Is that part of an auto replication process of the testing process? Is that just like the genetic material is there, but a living organism isn't there? So there's definitely some things that we can continue to refine and learn. So in summary, traditional, it's good for plants. It's good if you care about mapping multiple locations. Cons, we didn't get as many animals. It's time and staff and intensive. It's also expensive, to pay professional crews to go out there. EDNA, the pros, it's great to find the animals. So the things if you're interested in, round goby, zebra mussels, fish water flea, things like that. A few sampling areas can get you many species. So we ended up sampling from 4 places in the lake, and we were able to get, pretty good ones. So I put that kind of like, it's efficient, in a way, because you're gonna do a few samples and you can get just like a presence absence things. It's not as good with plants. So sometimes you can see the plants, but you just can't detect them in there. So my take home thing is don't throw away your rakes. You'll definitely need to use them if you're interested in mapping populations of invasive species. But, really, we need to be using all the tools in the toolbox. There's no one thing that works perfectly for everything. So it's really a combination of these monitoring methods that will be most useful. So big thanks to the DEC for the funding. Dana Homeland was our seasonal one who did a ton on there. Adirondack Research was the crew going out doing the traditional samples. We have many lake associations who helped us with access and getting samples and different things in the Cornell University. So with that, if there are any questions,
Brian, longer term, eDNA for aquatics. Are they refining the test, like milfoil, there's various kind of milfoil. Are they gonna come up with different panels to figure out what kind of milfoil? Are they working on that?
Yeah, so the second, one of the things is that, plants are always like the low step children to animals. So just the research and the genetic work we have on plants is not as good as the animals. So, so we are getting better markers and better, specificity with this, but it's not there yet. So if plants are your main concern, maybe eDNA might not be the best tool.
And these were all surface samples for eDNA that you were taking?
All surface samples, yeah.
And it was all metabar coding sampling versus qPCR?
It's a multiplex assay, so it's kind of like metabar coding, but it's like if metabar coding and qPCR had a baby.
Yeah, because I know sometimes qPCR can be a little bit more effective
Yep.
in specific species than the metabar coding.
Yep, and yeah, so then that's actually what
Yeah.
our project this summer will be on, is looking at comparing qPCR and multiplex assay with plants. But yeah, right now it's coming.
Did you, I apologize if I missed this, where did you detect the golden clam?
Lake George. Is what we know it's there. So that was like a good one, like that was the only site, but detected it there pretty well at that site, Bolton Landing site. So another good example, like we knew it was there and found it. And once again, you have these mussels that are in those things, and you're putting out all these juveniles at different times of the year, so it works well for them. All right, well, there are no more questions for me. I am happy to introduce our last speaker. And this is kind of like the preview part where we will go from we're gonna do this indoor portion here. We're gonna have Kiana get up and get to speak and get to tell us kind of history and different things. Our Zoom people will get to hear a little bit about it. But then we'll break, we'll have an informal kind of lunch here and do some sharing and talking. We're interested to hear what you all are saying. But then I'm really excited, after lunch, we're gonna go over to the nursery and get to see it in person and maybe do some hands-on different things too there. So yeah, I hope everybody can join me in a round of applause and welcome Rick to come and give us a speak about this. This is something I'm really excited about because so many times when we're talking about invasive species, I feel like we spend so much time talking about the invasive species that we don't spend enough time talking about the why we're doing. We're not removing invasive species just because we don't like invasive species. Most of the time, we're removing invasive species because they are damaging our native plants that help our ecosystem. So a big part of a lot of what we do, and especially even more so out of the Adirondacks, is when you're removing invasive species, you need to be doing restoration with it. And a key part of that is having these native plants to replant with. So I'm super excited about this coming up here. And you want to have the little the down button, and it'll go through there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Awesome. Hello, folks. I'm Kiana. I work for Ausable Freshwater Center. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for having us as the spotlight. I think you're absolutely right. There's so much overlap when we're talking about invasive species and native species. The lines are blurred everywhere, and I think it's a really important part of the conversation to have. So Ausable Conservation Nursery is a program of Ausable Freshwater Center, which is a nonprofit that uses science-based solutions to do stewardship of freshwater systems, mainly in the Ausable River watershed, but also expanding beyond into the larger Adirondack Park region. And so this project was born in, in its early stages in 2023. Ausable Freshwater Center does a lot of river restoration projects, healthy stream projects. And so during these restoration projects, a lot of disturbance happens on the banks of these restoration sites. We go in with machines, there's a lot of disturbance to the banks. And so often, the restoration happens, and then the second kind of tier of restoration is this reestablishment of vegetation of native plants on these bank areas. And so Ausable Freshwater Center does these restoration projects and then is often searching for plant material for these revegetation steps in the project. And so in 2023, my executive director, Kelly Tucker, and some folks from the board decided that the supply and demand of, and not just them, but the entire Northeast, there's a really high demand for native plants in the Northeast. And the supply doesn't necessarily match up with the demand. And so this project was born to basically supply Ausable Freshwater Center with the native plants that it needs for its restoration projects and beyond. So we're not just going to be servicing our projects, but also other restoration projects in the region, private landowners, whether you want to buy 1,000 trees or 1 tree, we're really hoping to connect with everybody. So this project is funded through Lake Champlain Basin Program. And so I came on board in 2024 as the nursery curator. And we are located here at the Uihlein Foundation. We're across the street. As we said, we're going to go visit in a little bit. And so in partnership with the Uihlein Foundation, we have access to their existing greenhouse over there, as well as the production field for producing bare root material. And we work with them a lot in terms of sharing equipment, tools, space, and a lot of future planning on exciting projects that are going to be happening in this area. So big thank you to Lake Champlain Basin Program and Uihlein Foundation for making this partnership possible and this program happen. In these restoration projects, we often use multiple different kinds of plant material for planting these areas. One being bare root, which I just mentioned. That's basically any kind of harvested tree that had it doesn't have like soil included in its root ball. It basically is a way that conservation projects can use high volumes of trees for typically lower cost than if you were to purchase like a containerized plant, as you kind of picture if you go into, like a retail nursery or something like that. So we're going to be producing bare root stems. Those are typically around 2 to 4 feet tall, depending on the species. We also produce tube stock here. And so these are little seedlings. These will either be planted in the field or just sold as is, either to other nurseries or to different restoration projects where this material might be a little more fitting. We also do a lot of restoration with bioengineering materials. When I say that, I'm basically talking about live staking, which is taking cuttings of dormant plants such as willows, dogwoods, sometimes alders, and pounding them into the riverbanks. Those plants are able to send out roots for any part of the stake that's underground and send out leaf material for anything that's above. So these are really good tools in terms of restoration in areas that are difficult to plant with bare root or seedling. And so those are the three kind of tools that we're using at the nursery right now. And we're also starting to dip our toes into some direct seeding in the restoration area. So more to come on that soon. So I figured it'd probably be fitting to start with seeds because that's often the very beginning of the process. So one part of this project that I find really interesting and exciting is that we're really focusing on the local Adirondack genotype of plant material in this area. So we're going out, we're doing wild collections in the Ausable River watershed, you know, and beyond. And that's the material that we're using to start in the nursery, the seedlings. And that's because, you know, in these areas, as you can see today, you know, we've got 40 degrees in May. These plants are adapted and have been for a long time for the harsh Adirondack conditions that we live in. And so, you know, planting these genotypes back in these areas tend to have a higher success rate as opposed to, you know, buying in trees that are coming from places like, you know, down south or out west. Not necessarily the same genotypes. Sometimes they do fine, and I don't want to, you know, totally discourage that. But I think that, you know, our mission is to really preserve that local genotype and use that material for our restoration projects and try to really, you know, reestablish these areas with the genotypes that were found before, you know, either it was clear cut or it's been restored or, you know, it's a farmland kind of coming back into reforestation. I think, you know, the more local and adapted these genotypes can be, the more successful these plantings can be. And so our team will go out often, well, I guess right now is actually one of the busiest times for seed collection. I don't know if you've seen a lot of seeds flying around yet, but this is a really, really busy time for seeds coming in. So right now we're focusing on a lot of willow seed collection, quaking aspen, balsam poplars. We're really focusing on those native riparian species right now for our collections, propagations, and restoration, just because that's where a lot of our projects take place. And so we're going out, we're collecting the seed, we're scouting the seed, and then bringing it back to the nursery to be processed and then propagated. And so these collections kind of continue throughout the whole season, you know, as we go from May to June, you know, early June, you've got the maples coming in, those seeds are starting to drop. And then you kind of have these lulls, so like midsummer, not as many seeds are becoming ripe, a lot of berries. And then as we move into the fall, that's another really busy time for seed collection for us. And so right now it's myself and my other coworker, Tully, who also works at the nursery, and then we partner with some of the other program staff within AFC to do a lot of these collections. My hope is that eventually we can kind of create more of like a community-based volunteer collection network. One, because it's really time-consuming to identify new collection sites, scout, monitor, and then also collect all of these seeds. So I'm really hoping to eventually, you know, create some, you know, community networking that we can, rely on volunteers to do some site identification, like, oh, I have, you know, a great stand of this species in my backyard or anything like that. So creating like a strong network within the community is one way I kind of see this capacity growing for seed collection. And so from these seeds, we take them back to the greenhouse, which is across the street, and we do our propagation in-house. So we use the seeds that we collected. We also use cuttings, which are similar to the live staking that I was referencing earlier, except much smaller. You can see here, they're about a foot long and about pencil thickness in diameter. So we use seeds, cutting collection, and that's like a clonal propagation of those species that can, that do really well when you use cuttings. And then we're gonna try our hand a little bit this year with some softwood cutting collection, which is basically taking green growth on some trees and shrubs and sticking it similarly as these cuttings. But it's similar, but the timing's a little bit different. And so as we wild collect this material, we bring it back, we propagate it in the greenhouse. And then from the greenhouse, these plants are going to be planted into our production field, which is right behind the greenhouse. And so this past year, we've been doing a lot of cover cropping and soil remediation in that area to try and prepare it for this coming year when we start to plant trees into our production area. And so one part of this project, well, many parts of this project was infrastructure upgrades over there to be specific for tree nursery production. So we're actually in the middle of installing a 8-foot deer fence around 10.2 acres of the production field, which is really going to be key to being able to efficiently grow trees out for, 1 to 2 to 3 years in that field. Deer browse is one of the hardest issues with any restoration or gardening or, so having that deer fence is really key to being able to grow to a scale and have this production cycle kind of be really efficient. The soil up there, it was used really heavily in potato production for a long time. So there's a lot of compaction issues from, having such an intensive use for so many years. And so I'm actually hoping that, as we plant these trees up in the production fields, those trees are gonna be able to send down tap roots, break up compaction, kind of remediate that soil. In addition to using cover cropping methods and different cultivation methods as well. And so for, I'm shooting for a 1 to 3 year flip on these trees that we're putting in the field. So as they go from the seedling size, they get planted into the field. They grow there to 1 to 2 to 3 years, depending on the species. We then go in and we harvest them using specialized nursery equipment called the tree lifter, which has a big blade on it. It drops down about 14 inches below the surface of the soil, lifts and cuts the roots while also shaking the dirt off. And so they'll be harvested as bare root at that point and used at these restoration sites. So as you can see here, this is a little tube stock that we planted last year at a site in Lake Placid. And so a lot of the material that we're going to be harvesting will be going to AFC programs, but also available for anybody else to use in projects. And so, as we talk about invasive species removal and all of that, being able to provide material to then, after a big removal, be able to replant this area so that, it's not just left bare and open for any other invasive to move in or to come back. I think that, trying to have this sequence, really tight sequencing of, removal, restoration, and replanting is really key in part of the planning process. And so, yeah, this is kind of where, I think there's a lot of potential to work with so many different groups in the area. In terms of restoration, there's so many great initiatives going on in this area, and we're excited to, be able to play a key role in that. And so right now we're hosting a lot of, we're hosting a lot of volunteers at the nursery to kind of get involved, get the community involved. Throughout the winter, we hosted some volunteer cutting collection for hardwood cuttings. We're gonna be hosting some greenhouse days for volunteers coming up to kind of get your hands dirty in the greenhouse. We'll have a project this afternoon if anybody wants to participate. And then we also are having a lot of planting projects that we're excited to have folks get involved with as well. So there's a lot of ways to get involved with the nursery if you're excited about it. And we're just, you know, trying to really, you know, work out our SOPs at the nursery over the next couple years and start to kind of scale up in a way that we can really start making a big impact. And so, yeah, I know that was kind of a crash course, and I'll kind of dive in a little bit more in detail this afternoon, but anyone have any questions off the back?
Yeah, I was wondering if you're collecting ash seeds at all.
Yeah, so, you know, I think we've been collecting some green ash lately. And I think that, you know, we're interested in basically right now, I have a list of priority species that I'm focusing on, but I am kind of interested in any kind of native seeds that are exciting that I can get my hands on. So yes, we are interested in growing and propagating ash.
Maybe a question for you and Ari. Spruces are resistant to HWA? Spruce trees, is that correct?
Yeah, I don't think you get HWA.
Not from hemlock woolly does it, but there are also some pests that can impact spruces.
Should we be planting spruces to replace hemlocks? And do you folks?
There
propagate
are,
spruces?
we have some of our partners down in the southern Appalachians who have started to reforest hemlock areas with red spruce.
Red spruce.
So a functionally similar tree doesn't have as many pests. So yeah, that's a good, you're thinking the right way. I don't know if we're there yet,
Okay.
or we're at that stage. But, in places that are further along the invasion curve in the Appalachians, you know, they are doing management work to think about like, okay, we should be thinking about what's gonna come next. And we should be planning things that we want to come there instead of just leaving it to randomness, where unfortunately, a lot of the things that replaces that are other invasive species.
So would red spruce survive in the Adirondacks?
I don't know the answer to that question.
We don't know, they won't.
They,
Zone 5.
yeah, because they're, I know they grow in the zone of the Canadian Valley region. In the high tops of the Appalachian Mountains in West Virginia, so I would presume that zone is the same as Adirondack, so they should, I would think.
I don't know that.
I'm gonna check.
We can look into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, maybe you want to try some.
So on that topic, ESF has a project it's actually about more, not a restoration project, it's more about climate adaptation. Actually, you all came to visit it last year. So in Newcomb, we're trying to plant mid-Atlantic species to look at, you know, if there are things that are kind of going to be moving our way. And this is more upland and less about the sort of stream beds. But I think the topic is kind of similar. How can we understand what might be coming in 50 or 100 years? And since these trees are so slow growing, let's start that now. So we're actually jump starting that and looking at a latitude gradient across most of the Hudson Valley, but it could be replicated elsewhere. So if anybody wants to learn more about that or come visit it, we put it purposely on Goodnoe Mountain, which has a very popular public hiking trail. So if you come to the mountain, you're going to walk right through this research area so that we're really engaging people to think about what is truly an Adirondack forest? What is our future going to look like if we're not, you know, going to just sort of let things happen? So it's less about pest management and more about, you know, kind of thinking landscape wise.
And I'm scared that Japanese knotweed's gonna be the Adirondack tree in a couple of decades.
And something that stuck with me about the presentation earlier was, you know, like all of, so many of these projects are so nuanced that you can't really do a one size fits all prescription for these areas. It really is site by site. case by case, and, assisted migration in some places might work in some ways, and, it's just like, it's really hard to, create these protocols when everything is constantly changing and really different around here, especially as you go up and down in elevation, we have such different climates from, in such a short amount of miles, so, yeah.
So I know you said that you have a lot of the plant material goes to AFC, but you're also available to anyone else who needs. And I know you mentioned this began in 2023. What kind of scale is this native plant material for the Adirondacks available?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Last year we started around 20,000 stems. This year we're hoping to kind of double that and be more, around the 40,000 stem region. And so there's this lag, right, from when you start the seed and so when it's like a finished product. So, we're hoping to kind of come online on a small scale this fall to kind of work out the kinks and then in 2026 really come online to be, like a distributor for maybe hard to say now, but yeah, be at, in that 20,000 stem ballpark for sale in 2026.
And then my second question is, are you producing, I know you talked a lot about stems and roots, are you producing seed at all?
We're not producing seed at this time, yeah, so, mostly we're, collecting seed in-house and using everything that we're collecting in our nursery production or any direct seeding trials that we're doing. So at this point, we don't have a lot of seed to be distributing.
Okay.
Yeah, recently we went down and we visited with Saratoga DEC nursery down there. They're a much larger scale than we are. But I think that there's, one thing that we kind of connected on is that there's a need for seed in this region and they feel it. And, as we're scaling up, we're going to also be feeling it too. And so I think that there's opportunity for collaboration on seed collection and distribution in the Adirondacks and New York State in general.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Two-part question.
Yeah.
One, which of the species that you've tried so far hasn't worked out very well?
That's a good question. So viburnums are really, really tricky for propagation. And so, we've been trying a few different stratification things. So I would say anything in the viburnum family gives me a lot of trouble. That being said, I think there's some places that are doing it really well. So trying to crack that nut a little bit. So if anyone's a specialist in viburnum family, come talk to me.
And then the flip side, which ones have been the easiest to get going? What is best at your nursery?
Totally. I think any of the poplars really are, they produce so much seed. So much of their seed is viable. It's viable very quickly, it's a 24-hour germ. And so those species tend to do really well at the nursery just because we can get so much seed. And I'll also say that, the maples also, and the oaks, because you can be so, they're so much easier to work with. They're larger seed. You can see if they're viable, just kind of by looking at them, feeling them. So we have, like a really high survival rate of those species, just because you can be a lot more selective when you're dealing with seed.
Deanna, this has been an amazing presentation. Thank you for being here today. With the willow types, Hamilton County Soil and Water Conservation District has used a cultivar called Streamco on a lot of our restoration projects. It's bendable during flooding and it takes really well. Have you planted the native willows that you are propagating at restoration sites, and what has the success been for riparian restoration projects?
Yeah, so, we're really focusing on that native variety of willow for sure. In terms of IDing the different species of native shrub willow. Little bit harder, so right now, I think that Beb's willow is one that we can very easily identify. It grows really well, it's really vigorous, and I think that is, one that we can separate by species and say, this one is going in these sites and doing really well. In terms of native shrub willows, I would say we're kind of calling them that right now until we can kind of get a little bit more refined in our willow ID, especially as, these species hybridize and it's really difficult. So we're kind of lumping the native shrub willow into just that, and hoping that at some point there's an easier way to kind of separate that out, and kind of build capacity within the nursery to do that. But yeah, I would say, we love Beb's willow at the nursery just because it's easier to identify, yeah.
We're getting that specific on plants. So I've been trying to repopulate an area of low-lying wetland on our property, and I've had a lot of success with willow cuttings, but not so much with red Aussie or dogwood cuttings. What am I doing wrong? Should I be doing like a stake procedure with winter staking?
I find that in general, like willow cuttings across the board have a higher success rate than the dogwood.
Foolproof.
Yeah, they are, and so you can't stake with dogwood stakes. I just think there's always, at least in my experience, there's I wouldn't say a very low success rate, but it's definitely lower than the willows. So that being said, I think that trying to find some larger stakes of newer growth. I think that the newer growth tends to be able to root a lot easier than like a really old piece of the dogwood tree. But then again, it's harder to kind of install as they, get wider in diameter. And so I would say you're not doing anything wrong. You're just,
Oh, I'm sure I am.
but I would just say across the board, willow staking for us has been really, really successful. Well, yeah, hope y'all can join for the.
Yeah,
hands-on.
maybe give a little sales pitch for this afternoon. What's our plan?
Look at the deer fence, which is going up, which is really exciting, and then kind of tour around the greenhouse, see what's growing, what started this year, and then we're gonna do a hands-on seeding portion for anyone who wants to stick around and get their hands dirty with some red oak acorns, popping them into some trays and getting them ready to go in the ground. Yeah. Yeah. Just because I've got a lot of it. Yeah.
I put a link into the Zoom to your all website. When we send out an email with the materials after this, we'll have a link to their website right there, which is a great resource to see some different things right there. So, yeah, let's give a round of applause. I think we have one last reminder slide to go down. We really appreciate everybody coming out to this today. We will have kind of an informal kind of lunch where we can kind of share ideas. Right after this, we're going to go and take a group photo right through there. Make sure you sign up in the sign up sheet if you didn't already do that. But really want to say, thank you so much for everybody for making the time to join us online or to come here in person. We really depend on having, our partners be here. This is something that I think bodes really well for APIPP, that, in our 20 years, almost 20 years of being a PRISM and our 20 plus years of being in an organization, partnership has really been at the core, and getting here all these cool ideas and these different places. I already have several notes written down of people I need to follow up with and go through there. So, it is, I think we are a great example that the sum is greater than the individual parts. And so all of us really working together and doing this is really what's going to help keep the Adirondacks in the best shape for our future, for the foreseeable future. So, thank you so much, and we're gonna go outside right now for all the people who are here. We'll say bye to everybody on Zoom. And, we
Bye, everyone
will,
on Zoom.
we'll, go out and have a photo, then we can come back in. We have some snacks and